I mean, just at this point, I do want to kind of bring in some other perspectives, the perspectives of other tennis players. And there isn't a tennis player that is more vocal than Nick Kyrgios. And it's quite interesting. He has been very animated, as you can imagine, over the last several hours on his feed. I'm just going to read you some of the tweets on his profile. He actually opened in full caps, dodgy as. With a couple of emojis, and then it got a little bit more kind of into an argument. So WADA come out and say it would be a 1 to 2 year ban. Obviously, Sinner's team have done everything in their power to just go ahead and take a 3-month ban. No titles lost, no prize money lost. Guilty or not? Question mark. Sad day for tennis. Fairness in tennis does not exist. I know a lot of players that are feeling the same way at the moment, so looking to hold live spaces next week so we can talk about it. Stay tuned for exact time. And then he just sort of tweeted, "Bad day for tennis." How do you think the players are going to be reacting, to this news? Do you think they'll be in this sort of Nick Kyrgios camp? Do you think the locker room's going to feel different when, like, Yannick Sinner, I guess, he comes back onto the tour? Will he just be accepted back because, he's served his time and everyone moves on? Or do you think there is going to be a hangover for it? It doesn't feel like Nick Kyrgios is going to be forgetting this anytime soon.
Well, I actually think that Nick has been pretty explosive in what he's tweeted previously. And I think there is a real sadness in his tweets because this is a really sad day for tennis. It's a sad day for the tennis community because the integrity of the sport and the transparency of the sport when it comes to these sorts of doping cases and doping offences, it's in an absolute shambles. I mean, it really is. This has been a mockery of how these things should be handled. And for someone who is an athlete, you can see why they would be so disappointed, like Nick Kyrgios, by the fact that there is no fairness because you see multiple different ways things are handled from Halep to Sharapova, and there is no real justice or comeuppance for the fact there is this doping test. So I think what's strange is that everyone has been so much on Yannick Sinner's side, from like the Jack Drapers to the Alcarazes, a lot of people talking about people's character. And I think that maybe they will be pleased that there has been a ban. They can say that he served his time and they can move on from it. But I don't really think anyone will be changing particularly their stance on it because people who made their stance clear, you would have a problem from the off when he wasn't actually suspended for a significant period of time and that was lifted. So this is more the final nail in a coffin for people who are looking for sport to genuinely be clean and for the checks and balances and the measures to protect clean athletes. This is probably a really tough day for them. And I think that speaks by the fact there were not many expletives in his tweets today.
No, I did enjoy actually that before all this kind of broke, that his previous tweet for that was just Wu-Tang forever.
I did keep scrolling as well. I was like,
it's quite funny.
I was like, was this in relation to the Wu-Tang? But I would ask you, yes, Joel.
Sorry. I was just going to say, just on the perspective of players, I guess one other thing to kind of think about in the dynamic is the lower ranked players, because, I was reading kind of Liam Brody, British tennis player. He said, didn't realize you could reach a settlement regarding a doping ban. Interesting. Back in time for French Open, I guess, question mark. Now, we've sort of talked about this idea of being able to negotiate now for a ban, but where does this leave this idea of special treatment and the top players getting something that is not afforded to lower ranked or less or lower profile players? Because again, is this like the smoking gun, as it were, in terms of like just showing how big that chasm is? The fact that Yannick Sinner, world number one, has negotiated down maybe to 3 months, whereas someone like Tara Moore, for example, was just left in, felt like constant limbo forever and ever. And she's still, I guess, trying to recoup her earnings. How do you think, the lower ranked players will be seeing this?
I mean, very, very disheartening. I think I agree with Liam Brody. I did not know until the Iga Swiatek case that you could negotiate a deal that worked for you. And her deal was that she wouldn't miss the end of season finals or the Billie Jean King Cup. And then the rest of her suspension would be served pretty much during her off season. So that 1 month ban was absolutely nothing. It was not felt for her either, apart from losing her number one ranking by not being able to compete in the Asian swing. In this case, again, barely anything has been felt by the top players. It is a case where if you have the resources, if you are part of the institution of tennis, and if your integrity is important to the integrity of sport, then I think there are different ways of handling things. Because on paper, as you say, this was an open and shut case. It was 1 to 2 years. Halep was given 4 years, that then got reduced to 9 months, but she had a period of much longer than that. And Sharapova was given 2 years. So I think, is something really shifting? I don't want to say there's necessarily significant sexism in this, but it does feel like whoever is in charge of these institutions now, something has changed where they actually aren't holding these players to account. They are very much looking for ways to get to positive outcomes whilst not upsetting the apple cart or the financial backers of tennis too much, whilst at the same time looking like, from an outward perception, that they are doing something to keep the sport clean. But if you're a lower ranked player, I mean, the incentive to compete and be clean has to remain, because you won't be afforded the same luxury as some of these top players who have the top lawyers and people protecting them. So, I mean, I'm a little bit shocked by this in terms of the fact that it is such a favourable time period. I did think there would be a Grand Slam missed. In terms of sort of someone who maybe hasn't read all of the things across the whole time, Joel, surely this feels like it's been handled differently. And what I can't understand is, why is it such a different way of handling it from the cases we've seen previously?
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, I think others being world number one and having so many, I guess, different stakeholders in your game,
Even the
has
Grand Slams are
perhaps,
stakeholders, I guess,
yeah,
right?
perhaps are influencing, because he's such a big deal. He's such a fan favorite that he can, you can make he can make or break tournaments. But I think that might have something to do with it. I do wonder if, as I say, over time, players have realized maybe their influence and their persuasiveness more. And we've seen more frequent examples of kind of top players in these types of situations. And I do wonder if kind of like a precedent has been set. You spoke about Iga Swiatek, and it's kind of like, well, if it's already happening there, then why can't it happen for other kind of big name players? Whereas I think maybe before, when in kind of, with Maria Sharapova, it didn't feel like it was happening as frequently. So it felt like you just had to maybe just accept it, take it on the chin, and there was kind of no leeway. But I think for me, this shows the influence and the power that the players have. And it's interesting that there are going to be people out there who say, well, he got a suspension, but at the same time, he's innocent, or like it there's kind of like this sort of conflict of information here of like how to sort of frame, like, he's innocent, or like it's his team. It's not him. It's his team. And yet, at the same time, he's going to have to take time off the tennis court.
And I think it does seem like we're going back to sort of the 90s era when it comes to this, because I mean, Agassi returned a positive drugs test. There was investigations done by sort of the same institutions that govern things now. He was given a 3-month suspension, but the punishment was not formally handed down because he blamed it on a spiked drink. And we're back into these, like, do you believe the excuses? Do you believe this? And then he later admitted he did take the substance that he was accused of. But it feels like he had a lot of power in 1997. And it feels like there was a wave where people were being held to account, but it feels like it's now sort of shifted the other way, and we're erring on the side of the player rather than the side of the integrity of sport.
How do you think the fans will accept Yannick Sinner when he does come back to the tennis court? I almost actually think, like, as I say, like, coming back in Rome, in my head, it's going to feel like, if assuming he does come back in Rome, it's going to feel like nothing has changed. The Italian crowd are going to go wild. They're going to cheer. They're going to cheer for the champion's return. That's sort of how I'm envisioning it, like gladiator-esque, Russell Crowe, big pantheon in the Colosseum. But how do you think what do you think the reality is going to be when he does come back to the tour from the fan point of view?
I think the reality is that you're able to allow yourself to just believe Yannick Sinner. And I think this is what happens with doping cases is that he said he's done nothing wrong. He's now said it's his team's fault. You know, he's very much said he's done nothing wrong. So if you are a fan, you will believe your player. And so I think if you are a passionate Italian fan, you will think this is actually not fair that he got the ban, but you'll be pleased that he is very much back on the tour in Rome. If you are someone else, you would have already had a problem before now because you would have thought, hang on a minute, why is this treatment different when there are two positive tests? Why was this different to some of the cases I've already mentioned? And it's a bit like, you know, when we talk about Zverev, some people know about what went down with some of the allegations against him. Some people don't, but it isn't necessarily something that's as widely known as it should be in the sport. I think a lot of people just like watching Yannick Sinner play, and a lot of people will allow sort of this incident to kind of be forgotten so they can enjoy the Carlos Alcaraz, Yannick Sinner era of tennis. And they'll be pleased that there is a solution, there is resolution for people, and that everyone can move on. But I think there will be a hangover for the integrity of tennis and for clean athletes everywhere.
Okay, we're going to wrap up very, very soon. But I guess one question I want to ask and end on is, what can we learn? What can tennis learn from this whole situation? Because it now, regardless of if people like it or not, it has now concluded and ended. What can tennis learn from this Yannick Sinner incident?
Well, I think we talked about it was very strange that Iga Swiatek was not on the tour during China, especially when we knew how much she wanted to keep that number one ranking. So I would say be very aware if there is any period where you do not see one of your favorite players playing. I also think if you are someone who is pushing the boundaries of what is legal in sport, I mean, this is almost a case study to follow. Have a reason that you're able to give immediately if you return or are notified of a positive test result. Make sure it's not associated with you, and then hire the same lawyer that Yannick Sinner had. I think that's the problem, is that the only learnings are that you can get around things and that it's no longer career ending to have a failed doping test on the tour. It's almost the playbook for how to not get away with it. I think that's probably one step too far, but how to get the best solution. Minimize. Exactly that.